Hello, I'm Jeremy, and today I'm going to be taking a look at a tile laying game by the name of 5x5 City. I think that's the name of it, although it says Go Go here, so maybe it's 5x5 City Go Go or Go Go 5x5 City. In any case, this game's put out by Okazu brand, and it is designed by Hisashi Hayashi, a Japanese designer. The box that I have, it's a Japanese edition, although it does come with English rules. Some of the components only have Japanese on them, so there will be some mild referencing of the rules during the game, your first game or two, although it's a relatively simple game and the language barrier, I'd say, would not be a major impediment for most people. The game plays from 1 to 4 players in about 20 to 30 minutes, maybe 30 minutes for that first game with rules explanation, much faster afterward. And the box says 8 and up, which seems about right. And this is a pretty simple tile laying game. We're going to be drafting tiles over 12 rounds, adding them to a 5x5 grid. Each player will have their own grid, so it's mostly a multiplayer solitaire game. And I will take a moment to show you how the game plays and come back and let you know what I think about the game. 5x5 City is a tile laying game for up to 4 players. Each player is going to get one of their city boards, which is this 5x5 grid. They'll put the water at the bottom, forest at the top. They'll also get one of these park tokens. It gives you an extra action. I'll explain that in a moment. And then randomly from this deck, you'll choose one number, and each player will get a card with that number. So let's just say we took number 1 at random. Each player will get one of these cards, which shows a way that that 5x5 grid is divided into subsections, each marked with a number. If you're playing the advanced game, you'll randomly take one of these cards, and that will give you an extra scoring condition. So this one, for example, for every row where you have 5 different types of terrain at the end of the game, you'll get 3 points. Maybe this one here, whichever type of tile you have the most of, each one of those will be worth 2 points, and so on. So these are pretty self-explanatory, although they're written in Japanese on the cards. The rule book in English does explain the rules for those in English. So you'll select one of those. That'll be a global extra scoring condition for each player. So the way that the game goes is it's played over 12 rounds, and there's this deck of cards which are just numbered from 1 through 12. You'll shuffle that up, and in each round you'll turn over one of those cards. So the active player will flip that card. So let's just say we're playing a 2-player game. So we got number 6, and then you'll look at your reference sheet here, this little grid sheet, and you can see space number 6 is 2 tiles large. So what you'll do, so like if I'm the active player, I'll draw out sets of 2 tiles, and you'll draw the number of sets equal to the number of players plus 1. So in a 2-player game, you would draw 3 sets of 2 tiles. And then the active player is going to choose one of these sets of tiles and place it into their city in section number 6. So in those 2 specific spaces. So there's considerations of which types of tiles you might want to take. So for example, let's just say this player took these 2, they would add them here. The other player might take 2, add them to their board, and then the other 2 would just get returned to the bag. And then after you've done that, the active player will switch, and then they'll draw a new tile. So now they got number 2, which is also too large. So they will put those sets of 2 out, again equal to the number of players plus 1, and the person who drew them out of the bag will get to draw first. So maybe this player will take this, and maybe and so you can see area number 2 is up here, so it'll be these 2 spaces here. Maybe I would want to take these 2 and put them here. So one thing that you could choose to do whenever you're placing a tile is to flip it over and essentially place a park. So let's say I took these 2 tiles, I could choose to put one of them down as a park, and there's a reason that you might want to do that. But essentially what you're going to do is you're going to end up at the end of the game with a 25 tile grid. This will all be filled in because you'll go through all 12 cards, and every space will essentially have a tile on it. And then what you'll do is you'll look at your scoring conditions. One thing that could happen during the game is that as soon as you put down your park, you could swap any 2 tiles. As soon as you put down your third park, rather, you could swap any 2 tiles. So at the moment you put that down, any 2 tiles you could swap. So maybe I might want this office next to an office. You could just do a single swap of any 2 tiles on your board at the time you put down your third park. So I'll set up an example, and I'll come back and I'll explain the way that this would score. Okay, so I've set up a contrived scoring scenario here, just to show you how the various things will score. And essentially then you'll just go through the buildings one at a time and see how each player scored. The game does come with a score pad with quite a few sheets on it, so you could score on here if you'd like. And essentially what you'll do is go through, like I said, each building type, and each player will score for each building type. So the first thing are the factories, and the way that the factories score, and again, these are in Japanese, but the back of the instruction book does explain all the scorings. And like I said, there are A-type scorings and B-type scorings, so you'll pick one of those at random. So what you could do is, turn half these cards over, mix and match, or whatever. But I'm just going to explain the A scoring. The B's aren't terribly different, to be honest. They just add some variety. So the factories, what you'll do is you'll look at your number of factories anywhere on your board. You'll get points for having those. So here I have 1, 2, 3, 4 factories. So you can see 4 factories would be 19 points. Next thing that you would do is look at houses. So houses score, there's 2 conditions for houses. If neither is met, it's 0. If one is met, it's 2 points. If both are met, it's 5 points. So you could see that houses want to be next to parks, and they also want to be not next to factories. So you can see here we have a house that's next to a factory and a park, so that would only get 2 points. This one's next to a park, but not next to a factory, so we get 5 points. Then the next one is the shops. Shops want to be in horizontal lines, so we get points for them being in a horizontal line. So here I have 4 that are in a line. Those would be worth 16 points. You could score multiple lines if you have multiple shops on multiple lines. Next, the offices. So offices, again, you could score multiple sets of them, but ideally they're going to be connected in a chain, not counting diagonal. So 4 within a chain, which is what I have here, would be worth 16 points. Then stations. So stations are interesting. They just want to be essentially alone in both their row and column. So here I have 2. They do not intersect in the same row or column. They would each be worth 4 points. If one of them was in the same row or column as the other, so let's say this was here, these would just get 1 point each. So you want to avoid doing that when you're taking stations. Not terribly hard to do, since anything could be turned into a park, but something to be aware of as you're planning. Next ones are warehouses. So you can see some of these cards have icons on them. So the shops, the factories, and the warehouses all have icons on them. They only matter for your warehouse scoring, those icons. And the warehouses will be worth 1 point for every icon of that type on your board. So, for example, here we have a little croissant warehouse. There's 2 of those, so that warehouse would be worth 2 points. And then here we have a computer warehouse. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 of those, so that warehouse would be worth 4 points. So it's a bit of a set collection. Public offices, they want to be adjacent to different types of buildings. So this one has 1, 2, 3, 4 different types around it. That would be worth 4 points. This one has 1, 2, 3. Parks would count in this case as a different type, so that would be worth 3 points. Those are pretty simple. Schools score 0 points unless they are next to a house, then they score 4 points. So here we have a school next to a house, so that would be worth 4 points. Fountains, like I said, any tile you can flip over to place a park. Fountains will score parks that they're in a chain with. So here, for example, you have a chain of 2 parks / fountains, and that would be worth 2 points. But if you have a bigger chain, they could be worth significantly more. Each fountain, so if you had, let's say this was also a fountain, and you had a 1, 2, 3, 4 chain, each fountain in that would score the whole chain. So each one of those would be worth 4 points. So that's another way to score your parks. And then finally, the parks, they don't directly score you points, but they do give you, they avoid getting you penalty points. So if you look at your number of factories, here I have 4, and then you look at your number of parks, I have 3. And if you have more factories than parks, you're going to take negative points. And you can see here that I have 1 more factory than parks, so I would get -2 points. So if you don't ever build parks, but you build factories, you'll get a substantial negative penalty for that. And then the last thing you would look at, it would be this special card that, again, would be different each game. And this one, once we have rows with all different things in them. So that's not the case here. It is the case here, not the case, not the case, not the case. So I would just get that bonus here once for 3 extra points. And essentially, whoever had the most points after doing all of that scoring would be the winner. Okay, so that is 5x5 City, and like you can see, it's a pretty straightforward game. It almost has the feel of a roll and write game because you're going to be focused on your own little board. There'll be some random elements each round, and you're trying to just essentially solve the evolving puzzle that happens over the course of the game without that much concern about what other players are doing. Of course, there's some drafting. Players could take tiles that you're trying to desperately get, but mostly it's a relatively non-interactive game. It is, I would say, a nice light to medium game. It's one that players are going to grasp right away. The scoring possibilities seem like a lot at the start when you're explaining them all, but as soon as you actually start playing, it's really straightforward what things do. And one bad thing about the game is definitely that all of these cards are only in Japanese. It does make it more realistic if you're not playing with players who speak Japanese to use the back of the rules and just let players use that as a reference to have so they understand how the different things score, because it is all laid out nicely on the back of the box, but it does mean that you're not going to be referencing these cards probably. It is nice that the game does have essentially two different scoring possibilities for each type of tile in the game, but I will say that most of them are pretty minor variations. So for example, one has the shop score if they're on a horizontal line. The variation for that is the shop score if they're on the same vertical line. So it's not a tremendous variation, although some of the other ones are slightly more varied. So it does give you nice variety, as do these city layout cards, which every time you play, those are going to be different. So the cards coming out, even though there's going to be 12 draws each game, the way that those sections are divvied up is going to be different each time. Again, I guess that does make the game from feeling entirely same each time, but again, it's not the most variety possible. I mean, generally you're going to be drawing 2 or 3 tiles every time, no matter which of these cards you get. Some of them do have single tiles on that. That's true, but mostly you're drawing 2 or 3 tiles and putting down somewhere on your board. It doesn't radically change the game from one game to the next. What is more substantial as a change are these cards, which give you a unique scoring condition. So that could be a few extra points. That's kind of nice that there is something that's legitimately different from the game to game, and there's quite a few of these. I think maybe a dozen or so of these. So you'll play a lot of games before you feel like you've exhausted the strategic possibilities in this deck. And I think that the amount of variety in here is nice, but it's not really the selling point. The main selling point is that this is a nice little puzzle game that you're going to be playing in 20 minutes and feeling like you've made a lot of decisions. There's 12 rounds in about 20 minutes, and you're just trying to optimize points, and other players are trying to do the same at the same time. So it's a nice, friendly feeling game for the most part, and it is, once you've played through it once, you pretty much internalize most of the ways that the rules work. So very low barrier to entry once you've played it that first time. It sounds like a lot of rules explanation up front just because there's so many different types of tiles, but once you've gone through that once, the game is nice and light and really easy. I think that there's something fun about the satisfaction of maximizing points on your own solitaire puzzle. So I think people understand whether or not they're going to like this game that's not especially interactive, or if they want something that does have a little bit more interaction. Again, the only way that you really interact with other players in this is by drafting tiles that they might want, which you could do even if you don't necessarily want those tiles, because you always have the option to put something down as a park yourself. So if somebody needs that last office to complete a large chain and score points, and you could block them from that, you probably want to do that, which is somewhat mean, but that's the only real interaction that exists in this game. But overall, I have to say that I really do enjoy this game. It's really straightforward. It's nothing more than it appears to be, I think, but at the same time, I think that it's gives you more potential routes to victory than most roll and write games do, and it's really approachable, which is a really good combination. So the fact that it plays in such a short time feels like you're making a lot of decisions over the course of that short time, and does have genuinely different viable paths to victory, makes it a winner in my book. So those are my thoughts on 5x5 City, a game that I'd recommend, and thank you for watching.